We're back here in Radical Civics Class once again, and we have a special guest here today, Rae Abileah. Have I got the pronunciation right?
Abileah, yeah.
Abileah? Mm-hmm. Okay, who is a national coordinator for Code Pink. And we've been talking about, let's sort of just review, we've been talking about government, why we need government, or even if we do need government. We've gone through the U.S. Constitution, and we started on the Bill of Rights. We've talked about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of press. We learned how to actually publish an article in Indie Media. And we did a crazy interview, which you'll hear on WTZ next week. And we also talked about cracks in the Constitution. Last week we talked about whether the will of the people is really represented in our government. Do we really, considering that there's 80% of the people are against the war, and yet we're still in Iraq, why is that? Does the government really function? And Code Pink is an organization that has sort of spontaneously sprouted up to challenge what's happening and see if citizens, mostly women, can make a difference in government. So we're going to have Rae talk to you today about Code Pink, and you can stop her and ask her any question you want. I'll just give you the mic to do that. So here's Rae Abileah of Code Pink.
Great. Well, hi, everybody. It's really, really great to be here. I live in San Francisco, and I work with Code Pink Women for Peace. And has anyone heard of Code Pink? Show of hands. Everybody in the room. Awesome. So I can tell you a little bit more about how we got started if you're interested in hearing about that later. But I've been working with Code Pink for the last 3 years, ever since I graduated college. And I graduated in the year of the presidential election in 2004. And I got on the road with another Code Pink activist, and we went all through South and the Southwest registering voters and talking with women about what we called pink slipping bush. So before our generation's time, when you got fired, you got a pink slip piece of paper that was pink that said you're fired. And so we wore women's pink slips, women's lingerie, and we went around and said, let's pink slip Bush, let's get him out of office. And that's how I got started organizing for peace. But I've been an activist since a long time back, since I was a kid protesting oil drilling on the ocean, where I grew up in California, and speaking out against domestic violence that I saw in my family and alcoholism. And I really love working with Code Pink because it's really fun. There's so many great women that are involved, and it's just very creative. And so I've gotten to work with Elizabeth Barger for the last couple of years now. We've been seeing each other in D.C. at protests and events, and maybe some of the ones that you both were at. And it's just really a pleasure to be here on the farm. I've been reading about the farm for a couple of years and hearing about Ina May's amazing midwifery work, and just really excited to be here. I wish I could stay longer, but I'm only here until Tuesday. Wow.
What's different about Code Pink than other activist organizations? What distinguishes you?
Well, first of all, Code Pink was initiated by a group of women. And even in the anti-war movement, there's still a lot of domination by male voices. And it was a group of women that got together at an environmental conference called Unreasonable Women for the Earth. And so they said, well, what's the connection between women's rights and environment and war? What do you all think? Is there a connection between women, war, and the earth? Any connections? No. What happens when you start bombing a country? What happens to the earth? Gets destroyed. Yeah. And what happens if people started bombing our country? What would happen to the women? How would our lives change? I don't know. Maybe one thing is that we would be taking care of families a lot more. Men wouldn't be there to be helping out as much. We see a lot of women are in the military these days, and so a lot more women fighting. A lot of women experiencing a lot of sexual harassment and trauma in the military. So a lot of things change that are really bad for the earth and for women. And so these group of women got together and they said, if women are really going to be if we really are going to have a peaceful world, we need women to be peacemakers in a stronger way. And so that's one thing that makes us stand out. And then in terms of our tactics, We're really creative and we're really vibrant, and we don't believe in just being angry and depressed about war and just screaming and shouting and marching in the streets. We believe in showing the world we want to live in by having really proactive, creative messages about peace. So we have giant banners that we drop off the sides of buildings that have our messages on them. We get inside of events, like really fancy Republican fundraisers where Bush is speaking. You'll see a Code Pink woman pop up with a sign and start saying something. And people say, oh my God, how did you get in there? You know, so we have really kind of sneaky ways of getting into places and making our voices heard. And we're the only activist anti-war group in the country that has a house for people to stay at in Washington, D.C., so that people, like Liz has stayed there several times and can come out and stay and join us every single day in the halls of Congress to be protesting this war, which is really important. It's important to have a home base to organize out of. It's important for us to get to know each other as family. And it's just a great financial resource for people. So those are some of the things that I'm.
You have to be a woman to join Code Pink?
No, definitely not. It's women initiated, and we encourage the leadership to be by women. But everybody, all genders, are a part of Code Pink. Some of our strongest members are transgender, and we get a lot of support from men as well. So
how about age? Could everybody in this room, if they wanted to, join Code Pink?
Everyone could join Code Pink. And what does it mean to join Code Pink? You don't have to pay a membership due. You don't have to be elected to an office. The way that we work is really grassroots and making everybody a leader. So you just jump into action. You say, I'm Code Pink. I'm going to put on this pink T-shirt and go and protest the war. Or I'm going to go and I'm going to see these military recruiters. Maybe, have you guys ever seen recruiters at a local county fair or elsewhere? You're seeing them. Where do you see them?
Everywhere.
Everywhere? Like where?
Like where all the poor people are.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Why?
Because poor people are more susceptible to brainwashing and, $10,000 bonus. Woo-hoo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know if more susceptible to brainwashing, but I guess the way I think of it is that those of us that have less economic privilege have less options about where we can go, when we get older. And so there's not very much money available for college scholarships. The economy is really poor. And when you don't have a lot of options and you do want to do something, make a success of yourself, a lot of times the very seductive military advertising is really appealing, because the military will tell us a lot of things that aren't true to get us to join. Exactly, which is absolutely not true. Yeah, so we do a lot of creative work like that, but everybody can be Code Pink, and we have an email list that if you all read email, if you want to get our emails, we send out these really colorful, fun to read emails once a week about how to get active for peace.
Why the color pink? Why not or green?
So the word Code Pink, it comes from, has anyone heard of the color-coded terror alerts that Bush made up called, Code Red, Code Orange, Code Yellow? Especially if you're going to an airport, you'll hear them saying, this is Code Orange, high security zone, don't leave your bag unattended. And so we think that's a lot of the government trying to make us afraid of each other, of people that look or do things that are different from us, and afraid of other countries. And so we said, we're not going to live in fear. We're going to be Code Pink for peace. And because we're women, and a lot of us have come from a feminist background, we wanted to reclaim the color pink as a color of power and not as a color of being less than men. And so that's why we chose the color pink. Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Just shoot.
It would be neat if we could go around and I could hear all of your names, because I haven't gotten to meet you all yet, and maybe one thing you do that you think helps the world be more peaceful.
How about our full names?
Your full names. Yeah, how about your full names?
Let's go around and just pass the mic around and introduce yourselves. Start with Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Kindfield, and Peter Burns Atkins Kindfield, and Dr. Peter Burns Atkins Kindfield. And one thing that I do for peace is I go to protests, and I guess I facilitate a school that we like to think of as a peace school.
Mm-hmm. Great.
First, middle, and last name.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Christina Eileen Davis.
And what's something you do for peace? Or that makes you feel peaceful? It could be anything. Anything you've done ever in your life. It doesn't have to be a protest. It could be something you do to make your friends feel better, something you do that makes the earth a better place, and your family.
You recycle.
My parents.
You think that's good? So you help them do that. That'd be good.
Okay.
She took a petition around that had the First Amendment on it.
All right.
Wow.
SOA with us, right, this year.
Oh my goodness. You've got a rock star activist in the room. You gotta start listing these things. It's great.
I'm Karuna Monroe Kindfield, and I recycle and compost and go to a lot of protests.
Excellent.
My name is Kimberly Ann Thomas, and my dad would take me to protests, and I'd go ahead and help them with the signs, raise them up. One sign, I like the sign a lot, honk if you want peace.
Mm-hmm. It's a great one because you can see how many people are supportive of peace.
I'm Elizabeth Lee Niblack Barger, and Kim helped us sell Code Pink shirts one time, and
Cool.
I go to a lot of protests and do a lot of emails, and I'm dedicated to really peace since we came to the farm. Actually, since before Vietnam.
I'm Zachary Lee Thomas. I go to protests and stuff. I helped Elizabeth with the Code Pink thing earlier this month. This month, right? Yeah. Okay. Trouble keeping track of time, and I recycle and stuff and things.
I'm Forrest. I'm the cameraman for Radical Civics at the farm school.
Awesome.
That's good, Forrest. I like that.
And you're a poster child for planning. That's
He's a poster child for peace.
a piece for
Also a rock guitar player.
Okay.
I find this whole thing very funny. The whole, let's give our full names. Why don't we throw in our social security numbers? And then list the protests that we've been to.
He's thinking. He's very good.
Can I take off my Code Pink shirt and show you my FBI badge now?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But I'm to go unnamed because I'm paranoid. And
You want to give us your nickname?
okay. And yeah, I don't know. I believe that there's different ways to get peace than a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I've been going to protests since I was like a little kid and stuff. Yeah.
What's one of the different ways?
Oh well, I don't think that violence is something that should be. I think it should be avoided until it's a necessity, but I don't think it's something that should absolutely not be used if it's appropriate. And I think it's appropriate in many instances that it should be used against the powers that be.
All right, thanks.
I'm Molly Michelle Smith. I go to many protests, and I volunteer for I volunteered for Code Pink and other peace activists organizations, and I try to make environmentally conscious decisions in my life.
Cool.
I'm Jessica Thompson, and I visualize a lot for peace, and I teach my kids things like, if we watch the news because they're using violence to get more ratings, then we are contributing to the violence. And I try to teach my kids because they're going to be a contributing part of society. And I don't know what else I do for peace. I'd like to be part of Code Pink.
All right.
I'm Winona Lakota Coots, and I try to remain calm and open in communication.
I'm Professor Von Algae Graf, radical civics teacher, and what I do for peace, I don't know, I just keep trying different things. I've tried about 35 things and just keep trying different stuff. One is to teach a class like this, and the other is to figure out how to change the consciousness of the people on the planet. And if you have any ideas, send it to me.
So I'm Rae Abileah. Sounds good. So one thing that I'm Rae Abileah. My middle name is Tanya, so Rae Tanya Abileah. And one thing that I like to do for peace is try to speak nonviolently with my friends in my community. And I also like to surf, and I like to hike so that I can remember why I'm doing this work. I think a lot of times we say that we want to save the planet, right? We know that the planet's going to be around a lot longer than people are. It's a rock floating in space. But what we can do is help to keep our species alive and healthy, and we can do that by conserving the things that we already have rather than trying to save them. And so those are some things I do, and I do a lot of creative protests, and unfortunately I've had to go to jail many times for the kinds of activities that we do that are very peaceful and I don't think should be arrestable things. So that's a little bit more about me. So, questions, comments about peace? We're in a really difficult time. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's not something I'm proud of. So Code Pink is a nonviolent group. That's in our mission statement, that we do creative nonviolent protests to redirect our resources, both human and financial resources, into life-affirming activities like more money for education and more money for healthcare. But when we say nonviolent, then we have to define what violence looks like. Right, there's a woman this week that went up to Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, and she had her hands painted with red paint that was supposed to look like blood. And she said to Condoleezza in a hearing in Congress, "There's the blood of the children of Iraq is on your hands. You know, you're ordering these deaths by taking this position." And she was arrested for doing that because, and they were trying to say that it was a violent act, that she was about to, aggressively attack the secretary. And we say, no, that's not violence. That's creative protest. It's nonviolent action, so we can look at a lot of the stories of Gandhi and nonviolence and take heart from that. We recently were doing actions at a military recruiting center in Oakland, or in Berkeley rather, where we were putting tape on the windows to change the messaging, and we were chalking on the ground, and they tried to say we were vandalizing the building. And we said, no, we're not vandalizing it. This is peaceful protest. So we do things like that. I personally don't think that it's effective to be blowing up Hummers and to be smashing the windows of Starbucks. I don't think that that's a tactic that's going to actually change the system. And I think that that kind of violence on one specific target is not an effective form of terrorism of businesses. Yeah. So I think we have to be really strategic about where we're at with this movement and how we're going to end war. We would not support that. What violence only begets more violence, right? So I just had this opportunity to see this amazing new documentary that came out called The Chicago 10, and it's about the protesters in 1968 that were arrested outside of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and horrible treatment by the cops. Horrible treatment, tear gassing, clubs beating. I mean, the older folks in the room probably remember it, and it was really horrific. We don't see that kind of police brutality as much these days, but we're also not seeing as militant of demonstrations and as big of numbers in some ways. So I think, when we see that, what makes that footage so horrible is that the people who are being attacked were, for the most part, maintaining a really peaceful presence. And so it just looks like they're just, slaughtering these people. And there's power in that. There's power in the media message of people seeing innocent, peaceful people being hit on by the cops. But the minute someone starts throwing a rock, the minute that becomes the story, the protesters beating the cops, the message gets lost. And I don't think that is then effective.
Seems like it'd be more meaningful to be like, we know what we want, and we know that eventually we will figure out that it's what is best for everything, and then you will be part of the movement or whatever. But I think personally, if it takes something like an act of violence to grab people's attention and make them really listen to you, because I think it's cool if you can stand on the street corner and hold up signs, people see you, but if you make yourself really viewable to everyone, no matter what, and not just by the means of corporate media, then I think the message gets passed further.
Sure, yeah, thank you for sharing your insight. I think you're right that we're at this really crucial turning point right now where a lot of people have stood on street corners all across this country and protested the war and held up signs like the one that you were talking about, Honk for Peace. It's a great sign. But we need people to do more than honk. We need them to get out of their cars and affect a massive change, a revolution in this country. But I don't think that that's going to be done through violence. Yeah?
What are, you mentioned in your mission statement that you're a nonviolent organization and stuff. What are some of the other principles that you base your acts on?
We have a set of agreements for our local groups. Even though each group is autonomous, they get to decide what kinds of things they want to do. But there's some agreements that people follow, committing to nonviolent communication with each other. It's really easy for us to just start yelling at each other and having petty disputes, and I don't think that furthers our movement when it's basically a divide and conquer method, that the Bush administration has been effective at dividing different racial groups, dividing different peace organizations, and we can't allow that to happen to ourselves. All of our resources and materials are pretty much open source, which means anyone can use them and can take our logo, can take our languaging, our press releases, and just make them into what they want to make them into. There's not a lot of strict rules and regulations. You don't have to have a president and a treasurer and a secretary to have a local group. It can be just a collective of people. So functioning, kind of like when you think of an anarchist collective of people working together. But that's the general. Liz, do you want to comment on any, guiding principles of Code Pink that you see?
Yeah, I think it's a real temptation to react with violence against violence. But we have to remember that we're outgunned, for one. There's no way that violence can win against violence, even if we weren't outgunned. To bring it down to that level then only gives that level the energy. So it's really important. One of the things I saw at the War No Warming, I was there across from the Cannon building, where that's one of the Congress, the House meets in that one. There's 3 buildings, and it was there on the intersection of Independence. And there were about 25 SDS kids, which that's the Students for Democratic Society. And they came out and locked arms and sat in the street and stopped rush hour traffic. That takes real courage to sit down in the middle of a main thoroughfare that cars are driving on and stopping the traffic. And there's the police there who they know they're going to be arrested. And those kids sat there and people brought signs behind them. And the police came and said, we'll give you a warning. We'll give you 3 warnings. And you have to get up and get out of the street or you'll be arrested. And they courageously held on to each other's arms. And they gave them 3 warnings. And at the 3rd warning, they began to pick them off at the end. And they applied pressure points to them. They treated them pretty roughly. And the kids didn't say anything bad to them. They were beautiful. They were so cool. And it takes such discipline and such strength for them to do that. And they were put in handcuffs and taken to jail. And they did that for 25 kids sitting in the street. And afterwards, when we met at the house later, after they were released from jail, they were so excited about it. They were so full of joy and determination to continue to work for peace in a peaceful manner. It was very effective. And, you know, what we need 1,000 kids to do that, so that when one line is arrested, then another line sits down and another line sits down. This is how we're going to make a difference, is when we get enough people out there who have the courage and discipline to really shut down the war machine. And the only way and the most effective way that we have is with our bodies and with our minds. We have to keep speaking peace and being peaceful. That, you know, I have a line in a poem I wrote. It says, love is the answer. It's the only answer, even if it's the hardest thing to do. Because it's real easy to throw a rock. But it's really hard to love the cop who's hurting your arm. And that changes. You saw a lot of those police didn't like that they were doing that. And you could tell that. Some were reacting with more anger. It made them angry to do something they didn't like doing. The thing is to understand that peace is the way to peace. What this government is doing is a war for peace. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you that violence spawns more violence, and peace spawns more peace. But sit in the road is effective to the people who it affects, and not even in that way, because it's these people see these kids on corporate media channels, and they were violent, they were engaging in illegal activities, they were dressed in raggedy clothes, eating. Well, I mean, but on the news channels, I'm not saying that they actually were. It doesn't matter what actually happens. It matters what's put into the ears and eyes of the American public. The reality, or whatever this is, doesn't matter to it. It matters what people see and what people are told.
Right, but why would you throw your rock at somebody
I'm not saying that.
Wait, let's hear the rest of her comment. You want to pass her the microphone?
Well, I mean, earlier you said, like, you think it might be beneficial for somebody to throw a rock at a cop in order to be seen, but I think that would be a worse light that they would be seen in even than corporate media could show them in.
No, but the metaphorical value of throwing a rock at a cop is that it's like at the SOA, you go, they're like, you can cross this line, this is where you're going to cross the line. And there's people that cut holes in the fence and go through those holes. But for me, just being peaceful and then doing whatever they tell you, it's like 1 minus 1 equals 0. If you do a peaceful act and then you submit to those who are oppressing you, then you don't get anywhere. I don't think.
Right. Okay.
You get somewhere. And also the other problem that I have with sitting somewhere and getting arrested is that all you're doing is pumping money into the American jail system, which then pumps money into the war, thereby canceling your efforts.
Right. So you're making two fantastic points, and I'm forgetting your name is. Oh, you're unnamed. Right. We don't know your name. All right. So you're making two brilliant points. One is if you are just doing something, it's really peaceful, you're cooperating basically with what the cops are wanting. You're not doing anything that really disrupts the system, and then you're still getting arrested. The other one is that by getting arrested, it's costing a lot of money. First of all, cops are working overtime, and so they're getting paid a lot. It's costing the city money to have that additional police presence there. And then you're cited, and you have to pay money to either get out of jail, or you have to pay money to pay that ticket so your record gets clear. So at the end of the day, a lot more money is getting pumped into the police state. Right? Did I get those 2 points? Right? Okay. So those are two really valid points, and I think we need to go back to why do we do civil disobedience? Why do we get arrested? Right? We get arrested when we have exhausted every other form of changing the system, when we've written letters and called and written letters to the editor and tried marching in the streets, and we've rallied and we've done everything that's non-arrestable, and the system is so broken and so corrupt that there's no other way to get the message out. And so then we resort to putting our bodies on the line out of a situation of desperation, and in many ways out of a situation of powerlessness. And we do it to regain the power of change. So, as you all know about, people that were in the civil rights movement, right, who sat down at lunch counters because they had tried everything else and were not being heard, and segregation was so strong in this country. And so by sitting down at the lunch counter, they were doing the action that they wanted to be able to do without getting arrested. They were doing something they felt should not be an arrestable action and being arrested for it. The same thing with the buses, sitting down at the front of the bus. They were doing something that they felt should not be arrestable, and they got arrested anyway. And that's the kind of action I think we have to be doing that's not going to pump money unnecessarily into the police system, and it's not unnecessary. It's really courageous, right? I mean, would you agree that kind of action is courageous?
I believe in civil disobedience. I believe in mass civil disobedience.
Yeah.
To the point where it's not 10 kids sitting in the middle of the road or however many there were. I mean, I think that it would actually. I don't think that 10 kids sitting in the road is going to be productive. I think that if you really planned correctly and you really used your mind and because there's a whole bunch of people that want peace, that want to do these things, yet there's still only 10 kids sitting down in the road, and there's only 100,000 people at the protest. That's planned.
So great. So I want to say one thing about that, and then Peter and Molly is it Molly or Jessica? Okay, Jessica. So just, one thing Liz said, we need thousands of young people waiting to get in line to sit in the street so that one group gets arrested, you have another group come back, and more. We do need more people doing this, and we need more strategic actions. Blocking military bases so bombs can't get shipped off, shutting down the ports, shutting down the recruiting centers, shutting down the war machine, not just standing in front of the White House. So, go ahead.
Actually, you're speaking to what my question was going to be, which is like what kind of, you talked about the criteria for your actions, that they're peaceful, that they're, somehow disrupt the functioning of the machine, that they're things that you feel we should be able to do without being arrested, that they're things that are creative. And I'm just curious to hear sort of more of a list of the kinds of actions that you've been involved in or have helped organize or that you think are the most productive. That's where I get most tripped up to hear fun, but like what are the actions that we ought to do?
I want to throw in what I call a brick into the conversation, which is talking about civil rights. And this isn't necessarily my viewpoint, but some people have expressed the viewpoint that Martin Luther King would not have been effective if it weren't for Malcolm X. Malcolm X espoused violence, and the majority of the white community decided, whoa, we better go with Martin Luther because Malcolm is so far out there. So Malcolm, the argument has been made by a number of colleagues of mine that Malcolm actually had the effect of making Martin Luther King a lot more reasonable looking. And so I'll just throw that in too.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sense, one of the things that Code Pink does is that we come across as the women really on the front lines, and some of the things we do really engage and bring in the mainstream America that's against the war. And some of the things kind of make people go, whoa, oh my God, I can't believe this woman is up there in front of Condoleezza Rice. That's outrageous. They're screaming in the middle of hearings. And I think that kind of stuff does push people more to the middle, and then they're like, oh, I guess, I'm not going to be Code Pink, but I can join Move On. Or I'm not going to be Code Pink, but I can march in the peace protest. So by being that audacious voice that's extremely present and visible, it makes people feel like, oh, well, I'm not going to be standing up in a hearing or getting arrested, but I can call Congress, and that's how we kind of push people a little bit towards. But yeah, it's a really valid, piece.
Right now, Code Pink, lately, you're sitting here with what the mainstream terms are radical. And Code Pink has actually been singled out by Hannity and Combs and all the right-wing talk shows now as like the extremists. And in fact, Medea Benjamin and somebody else couldn't even get into Canada. They're on the list of FBI's dangerous criminals. Dangerous. They've never done anything violent, but they're dangerous because of what they're saying. And suddenly they're not even allowed into Canada.
Right. I mean, it's pretty crazy. I wondered if we could talk for a minute about what kind of holds up the war machine. What is it that maintains a war structure? What enables there to be a war? Fear? What else do you need to start a war?
Segregation.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there need to be two parties, something pitted against something else.
Two parties?
Segregation of peoples. What? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hesitate. I mean, I guess you don't need enemies to start a war, but enemies are created during the war.
Okay. What else? If we wanted to create a war, what else? Huh? Soldiers, great. Soldiers. Funding, great. What else? How about supportive people?
I was about to say support.
Support?
Because that's the line that everybody says.
Apparently not, to be honest.
But to start a war, we're talking about right when we're getting ready to start a war, what do we need, right? We need support. We're talking about what do we need to get a war started? A positive outcome? So a hope for something better, kind of?
Idealistically.
Well, you need to sell it that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, because like when the Iraq War started, it was like, we're freeing these people from Saddam Hussein. We're like, they were tortured and blah, 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 blah. So we're going to torture them, but it's going to be with U.S.-made products. They're outsourced to China.
Wait, there's a point. You need someone who's going to profit from the war.
Yeah.
Right? A way to make money off the war?
I mean, the way you said positive outcome, I was going to say positive outcome, but by positive outcome, I mean positive outcome for the, 1/10 of the 1/10 of the 1/10 of the 1% of the country that's really on top.
Right. Great. So that war profiteers, and then also you need to be able to tell the people that something good will happen, even though we know that going to Iraq was not about freedom and democracy. In many ways, it was about oil and about making a lot of money and power. And we know there were no weapons of mass destruction. We know all of that. But people believed in this country that there were these positive outcomes. Yeah.
Sort of dehumanize victims, which is one of the reasons why sort of the current war effort is so much scarier than Vietnam, because at least in Vietnam we got to see like moms, you know, crying, holding their melting babies, and people could see, wait, those are human beings, but we don't even get to see the pictures now, so it's very easy to just...
No coffins.
Right.
And Bush never attends funerals.
Yeah.
All we see is George Bush go to Taiwan and all the kids like, yeah, we love you, we love you.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I wonder if we can talk about how we actually take apart the war machine. And I have a kind of a setup, some theater we can do with each other to do that. You want to do that? We have some time? Yeah? Okay. So I need 6 volunteers, which is basically like half of us in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 more. 6, Molly. All right. So what I'm going to do is move this over. Yeah. Put this on here. And so let's see our volunteers come up to the front. Okay, so one thing we just said was American public support and a culture of fear. You're going to be American public support, and you can put this around your head. And then we have compliant media. We're going to all line up in just a minute. So we've got compliant media. We have war profiteers and oil companies. We have Congress. We need the support of the American Congress. You want to be Congress? An adequate supply of troops. And then these are about international coalition and an ally with the Iraqi government. You're going to get to be both of those. Representing our foreign. Okay, so once we have this whole team assembled here, once we've got all these ducks in a row, then we can make our war train. So the way we're going to build a war train, don't worry, you're not going to have to jump through this hoop. We're going to actually build a train. I know it's miraculous. I travel around the country and I actually have a train with me. And here it comes. Ta-da! There it is. This is going to be our war train. All right. Thomas might be really sweet, but don't worry, this train is menacing. It's cruel, right? Even though it might look nice, it looks very sweet and beautiful, but we know actually war is really harsh and cruel. So I'm going to ask all of you, you're going to be like the train tracks, right? And we need all of you to make this war train go. So I'm going to ask you to hold this up. Can you come hold up our war train? Be the train tracks? We want you to...
Yeah, Thomas is on this side.
Great, and can you hold it up a little bit higher so we can see your heads underneath? Okay. And your signs. All right. So to get this war train derailed, it's going really fast. It's going on express, right? And we want to derail this war train so that we can end the war. So what are we going to do? We need to start working on pulling you out so that we can stop this. And we know that this is how we're going to people-powered take down this train. So let's start out with American public support over here, right in the middle, holding it down, holding it up, brother. How do we get rid of American public support? How do we do that? How do we stop people from believing?
We can use indie media.
Mm-hmm. Great.
We can point out that, like, the U.S. government, in fact, is not supporting the troops at all, and that we're really doing horrible things to the veterans, and that the peace movement, you know, can actively really try to take care of the vets and show
right.
that the government isn't doing that.
So we have education, doing teach-ins, educating people about what's really going on, the stories they're not hearing in the real media. We can march in the streets. And marches build public support. They let us know that we're not alone, especially in places like Jonesboro, Tennessee, where we had this march of 500 people saying we're not going to be standing for war. Rallies, vigils, public events, documentaries can turn that public support, and we've done that because we know that now in our country, the overwhelming majority of people want the war to stop, and especially the overwhelming majority of women. It's something like 83% of women want the troops to come home by the end of the year. So we've done that. We've changed American public support. And on the other side of your sign, we have the culture of fear, right? So we've changed the culture of fear with things like Code Pink, just flying in the face of the color-coded terror alerts, make humor, making fun of it, and then redefining what real security looks like and saying real security is about being compassionate and loving to each other. And it's not about being afraid of, is my neighbor going to come and rob me in the middle of the night? Am I going to get bombed? So redefining that, breaking down fear, and doing courageous actions that empower us, speaking to these politicians directly. All right? So we've changed American public support. I think we can get it out of here. What do you all think? Let's get it out. Oh, watch out. Don't let it fall. You all are holding it up. All right. American public support is out of here. How about compliant media? How could we defeat you, corporate media? How could we?
Thank God that our president is a dumbass and is the most uncharismatic person on the face of the planet.
Why God?
But how does that help us take down the corporate media? Let's stay focused on media. Okay? Let's look at how are we going to change the corporate media that's helping to support the war by getting a message out there that we have a war on terror, that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. How do we do that?
I think a better way, rather than defeating corporate media, would be to have more independent media.
Yes.
And so we could offset the lies and propaganda that corporate media is telling us.
Huge, huge.
They say we're just propaganda. They say they're just propaganda. They're really good propaganda.
Well, we could have rallies outside them saying, shut up Fox or shut them down, but independent media is a huge one. So there's a couple of really important things we've done over the past few years. Democracy Now!, this great show by Amy Goodman that brings the real news to a lot of people, and Free Speech TV and YouTube with all these locally made videos, So we've got...
One of the things that people don't realize is corporate media reacts to public criticism just like congressmen. And if 1,000 people write a letter to a TV station and say, we object to what you put in there, they consider it probably even more than the Congress does.
For sure, because it affects their readership, especially if there's a letter coming from all the people that are buying their newspaper and have subscriptions. So we can really change up the compliant media. So let's take the media out. Okay? So what's next? How about Congress? Congress needs to support the war. They need to vote to fund the war. And on the back here of your Congress sign, it says adequate supply of money and budget, because Congress has the power of the purse. So what could we do to Congress?
We could vote in Democrats. Oh, wait. Oh, that didn't work.
Great. Excellent. So we were told by the Congress last year that all you have to do is help us elect Democrats to office, and then we'll work to end the war. And so we did that in November. We elected Democrats, and we felt like voters had given Congress a mandate for peace. And then what have we seen? We've seen them very minimally raise the minimum wage. It's a tongue twister. And we've seen them do some good things for Social Security, but nothing significant on the war, continuing to fund the war. Very frustrating. So,
There was they actually voted in a raise in the annual war budget after they were like, we're going to be all for peace, and then the war budget gets something like a $400 billion raise from the year before.
It's called a supplemental spending bill, and there's another one on the table. So they keep funding the war. So Congress we've changed the demographic of Congress, which I think can be considered to be a victory in that people turned out to vote. And when people see the Democrats doing nothing, either it holds them accountable. They can't use the alibi of, it's all the Republicans anymore. We're every day in the halls of Congress trying to change them. And there are more and more Congress people that are speaking out about only funding a withdrawal of our troops. You've got quite an engine there at the front of the train. which is kind of, synonymous with war profiteers, or have the highest technology because they've got all the money. But Congress, a lot of things that we can do to change Congress. We can write letters, we can call, we can be in their offices sitting in and saying, I'm going to sit in your office until you leave, and we need more numbers of people to do this. We can sit in, we can be in Congress every day. So we can do a lot, I think, to change that Congress. So let's get Congress out. All right? What about our war profiteer over here, our rollerblading war profiteer? What can we do? This war has more private soldiers, mercenaries, and more private contractors on the ground helping than any war previously that the America's been involved in.
On rollerblades. We need to take away their rollerblades.
Take away their rollerblades. How do we do that?
Taking out, you undo the straps and then you grab it out.
Funding, yeah. Take out the funding. It's hard to do a boycott because we don't go to the grocery store and see Halliburton cereal on the shelf, right? We don't actually pay for this.
But in a capitalist system, at least to me, it seems like there's different entities and different companies, but they're all part of the same. I mean, I'm not saying like Nabisco and Shell are collaborating together to steal everybody's money, but in a system like the system that we live in, all the war profiteers, it's really like a hierarchy of companies, because the money gets pumped into the war, and then that gets, you need food for a war, so eventually that goes down to food.
Exactly. So let's see what's on the back of your war profiteer sign. Oil companies, right? So Shell is huge in this. So we can protest and boycott certain oil companies. We can go to their shareholder meetings. We go to the Halliburton shareholder meeting, and we get inside, and we actually protest inside, and that affects the shareholders who are investing in the company. And we do a skit where we have Hallibacon. So we dress up as pigs with our pig snouts and throw money in the air and draw attention to the gross amount of war profiteering. There's a great documentary that came out called Iraq for Sale that helps educate people about what's really going on with these war profiteers. And then cutting the funding. If Congress won't cut the funding, one thing we can do is stop paying our taxes so that most of you in the room are not having to pay taxes yet, but we can ultimately as a people stop paying taxes, so that we're not funding the war machine. So that's one thing. There's 4 kinds of contractors. There's people who are rebuilding the country, allegedly, right? There's oil, right? There's oil. There's weapons suppliers. And there's mercenaries. There's the private security. So we have to work on all 4 of those targets. But until we stop this money, this profiteering from war, there's always going to be a motivation to go to more war. So let's take you out, war profiteer. Let's say that we're not going to have private war anymore. Okay, who do we have left? We have troops and recruits over here. Adequate supply of troops. What can we do about that?
We can go to where they recruit, and people are doing that. People, get out and protest in front of recruitment stations. Also, a number of my friends, Thomas Hekla, goes to high schools and tells kids anti-recruitment. And actually, by law, the schools have to, bring them in, have to allow them to do that. So that's one way of kind of reducing the troops.
Is to let each other know about what are our rights when we talk with a recruiter, what really happens when we join the military, and break down the myth that when we join the military we're going to get thousands of dollars for college and a cash bonus and fun and travel and adventure, when the reality is that we're going to be going to war. And we're going to be, on the front lines, targets, and come home with immense emotional damage, if not limbs missing. So that's one thing. What about the troops that are already in the military? The U.S. government relies on obedient troops who are going to do what they're told to carry on occupations, to start new wars. What can we do? Let's hear from someone else, because
They can protest by wearing funny hats and stuff. That would be a way to protest people. All the uniformity in the military, so keep them in control, so you could have more funny hats.
Okay.
And that would be disobedient. It would be funny, and it would be a good way to protest.
We actually covered a case on that, a free speech case, where someone wanted to wear their yarmulke. in the military, and they were not allowed to.
Wow, yeah. My friend faced that at West Point.
Yeah.
That situation happened in the Jewish community. What else can we do if there's troops in the military? What can they do to protest the war? What can troops do to protest?
Refuse to fight.
There you go. Refuse to fight. They can be conscientious objectors. They can lay down their weapon and say, I will not go to Iraq. Or they can come home from Iraq and say, I will not go back. Because a lot of our soldiers, our young men and women, are getting sent back to Iraq 2, 3, 4 times, over and over again. Their contracts are being changed after they've already signed them to make them go back, and so they can refuse to fight. So one of the first people to refuse to fight was Camilo Mejia. He served in Iraq for 8 months, and then he came home and he said, I'm not going back. You will not send me there. I have a young daughter at home, and I'm going to stay here. He was in jail for a year because of that. We can support people that are doing that. A woman, Suzanne Swift, came home and she was violated sexually by her commanding officers. She was harassed. She came home. She said, I will not go back and be with men that are going to treat me this way. And she was sent to jail as well. But she's been speaking out about it and empowering other soldiers to speak out so we can support resistors. There's over 5,000 troops estimated have fled to Canada going AWOL. We can send money to support them, to help them, and to say, what does real support for the military look like? It looks like supporting our troops when they get home, to have benefits and to get health care, and supporting them. Well, our chain's getting real wobbly here. But supporting our troops means supporting them to not fight as well. And during the Vietnam War, like you said about funny hats, they wore black armbands. So it can be really effective messaging. So we can do a lot to to support people to not go into the military and to support our troops to resist. Right now, active duty soldiers in Iraq on the ground, 72% of them want to leave, want to get out of there and come home. So let's take you out, troops. Oh, this is a real shaky train because the only thing holding it up is International Coalition of the Willing, all the people that help us fight, our moral respect and reputation abroad of America, and the ally with the Iraqi government. So when we first went into the ally with the Iraqi government.
1 second.
Yeah, sure, okay. All right, so during